Running for office is a grueling experience, and in our age of ubiquitous cameras and rapid dissemination of information through the internet, politicians need to constantly be on guard, lest they make a critical gaffe that ends their campaign. As these modern campaigns become increasingly complex, an entire industry of supposed experts and pundits has arisen to help manage every aspect of a modern politician's career. But their advice typically boils down to a few key constants. Play to your strengths, demean your opponents, and give voters something to believe in. But if any future candidates watching this want to save on the six-figure salaries these Ivy-educated consultants are bound to charge, I recommend reading On Running for the Consulship, a brief pamphlet by Marcus Tullius Cicero's younger brother Quintus on how to run a foolproof campaign for the consulship, ancient Rome's highest political office. The guidebook was written for Cicero and was necessary because, despite his many talents, Cicero was a new man and lacked the prestigious lineage which was often required to win high office, and also because Roman campaigning conventions frowned heavily on the use of public stump speeches to win over voters. This, perhaps more than his status as an outsider to the old nobility, would have seriously complicated matters for Cicero, as he was most well known for his oratory, meaning that what should have been his greatest asset on the campaign trail was more or less off the table. Quintus knew that his brother would win this race, or lose it, through the old-fashioned, oftentimes incredibly dirty business of politics. But first, a note on the authorship of the work in question. Scholarly debate persists on whether it comes from the pen of Quintus himself, or perhaps a later author writing under a pseudonym. I wanted to acknowledge this, but don't want to get dragged too far off topic. Suffice it to say that there are strong arguments for both positions, but that in my view there is ample reason to believe that it comes from Quintus, and even if he is not the source, it still provides a tremendous perspective on the actual mechanics of politics in the late Republic. For example, the guidebook lets us know how electoral coalitions were assembled, detailing the importance of trading favors among the elite to secure support for political campaigns. But we also gain a better view of politics closer to ground level, as Quintus discusses the importance of working to win over the collegia and other associations that united equestrians, rich plebeians, and the urban voters who could make or break a candidacy. In my opinion, this practical approach to ancient Roman elections offers more insight into how they actually functioned than the constitutional theorizing of Polybius, or the moralism of Livy, who discusses elections many times in his history, but always glosses over the actual workings of politics. The guidebook is so detailed because, as mentioned earlier, public speaking in the form of the stump speech, which has become a staple of modern campaigns, was heavily frowned upon. Candidates could provide public addresses to the people only under specific circumstances, in the contio assemblies, which were formally convened by magistrates. As such, the candidate would not travel throughout the city and its environs delivering impromptu, unscheduled, and unapproved speeches to all and sundry. Indeed, even during the remarkably unconventional consular campaign of the radical populist Gaius Marius, the historian Sallust tells us that he did not even address the Roman people on his own behalf until after he had won the office. But why exactly was this specific form of public address considered an illegitimate tactic? After all, this shunning of public speeches seems to contradict the Roman passion for rhetoric and oration. The answer lies in the peculiar class dynamics of Roman elections. Candidates were always from the upper strata of Roman society, and those they sought to impress were overwhelmingly from the lower order. This resulted in enormous tension because the elite naturally wanted to do all they could to win over the poor, but aristocratic convention required that they maintain their dignity, for after all, they stood in as a microcosm of the entire elite while campaigning. Candidates needed the support of the people to win, but it was unbecoming of a man of status to beg from anyone. let alone the poor plebeians. The view, then, was that it was better to lose with one's head held high than to demean oneself, and by extension, the entire aristocracy, by offering public speeches to the masses that touted one's candidacy. Rome's aristocrats knew that despite internal disagreement, a unified front must be maintained at all costs, and for the bulk of the Republic's history, they held the line, with only a few outliers. It was not until the fractious final generations of the Republic that aristocrats became more concerned with winning power than the shared social expectations incumbent upon men of their station. And it was this decline of precedent and inherited social cohesion that spelled the end of the Republic. If you're enjoying this video, please do us a favor by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're a small channel, and this is the only way to get the almighty YouTube algorithm to notice us. Furthermore, you can help Tribunate become more sustainable by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Thank you for all of your support. It was in this strange new post-Gracchi, post-Marius, post-Sulla reality which Cicero embarked on his campaign for the consulship. The consensus among the elite was starting to fray, and if we believe Cicero, then his opponents, Gaius Antonius Hybrida and Lucius Sergius Catilina, were moral reprobates willing to engage in unethical campaign tactics. This may have been true, but Cicero's penchant for political mudslinging means that he is far from an objective source. For if he abided by the approach outlined in his brother's book, then Cicero would have run a sterling, by-the-book campaign that honored all the old conventions. While we may doubt that Cicero was such a paragon of integrity, he was a politician after all, and an ambitious one at that, it is important to recall that he positioned himself throughout his run as a champion of the elite old families. Though a new man, he sought to portray himself as a more steadfast defender of aristocratic privilege than the erratic and untrustworthy Catiline. Quintus recommended that Cicero demonstrate his superiority to his opponents by engaging in unrestrained character assassination. Hybrida was derided for publicly keeping a slave as a mistress while praetor, but the harshest invective was saved for Catiline. Why should I speak of him as a candidate for the consulship, who caused Marcus Marius, a man most beloved by the Roman people, to be beaten with vine rods in the sight of that Roman people from one end of the city to the other, forced him up to the tomb, rent his frame with every kind of torture, and while he was still alive and breathing, cut off his head with his sword in his right hand, while he held the hairs on the crown of his head with his left, and carried off his head in his own hand with streams of blood flowing from his fingers. A man who afterwards lived with actors and gladiators on such terms that the former ministered to his lust, the latter to his crimes, who never approached a place so sacred or holy as to not leave there, even if no actual crime were committed, some suspicion of dishonor founded on his abandoned character. Quintus recommends other tactics that would befit the modern politician, encouraging his brother to flatter the voters by making even those he detested or thought below him believe that he was their ally. Because voters had to place their hope in him, Cicero was also encouraged to make empty promises he knew he would never keep. Cotta, a master in the art of electioneering, used to say that so long as the request was not directly contrary to moral duty, he used to promise his assistance to all to bestow it on those with whom he thought it would be most advantageously invested. He did not refuse anyone. But if a degree of tactical dishonesty is encouraged toward the masses, Quintus is clear that Cicero must be honest with himself. The work opens and closes with a mantra which Cicero is urged to repeat to himself. Consider what the state is, what it is you seek, who you are that seek it. Almost every day, as you go down to the forum, you should say to yourself, I am a novus homo. I am a candidate for the consulship. This is Rome. Cicero's status as a new man was something that could never be denied, so instead he was encouraged to lean into it, to wear his newness as a badge of honor and hold himself up not as an outsider seeking to infiltrate the greatest office in Rome, but as a man who exemplified the most exalted traditions of the aristocrats themselves, even more so than his rivals who came from storied families. Evidently, this tactic worked, as Cicero would win the support of the aristocracy, despite his nominal status as an outsider to the elite cadre of families that typically controlled the consulship. Here, more than anywhere else in the guidebook, is a lesson I feel may actually be useful to modern politicians. There are various aspects of your identity and record which can't be denied, and voters will respect someone who refuses to run away from their convictions, even if polling shows that the candidate may be on the minority side of that single issue. Then as now, voters want authenticity instead of poll-tested talking points. Finally, I want to conclude by looking at a piece of advice from Quintus that I feel is the most illuminating regarding the political climate of the late Republic. Cicero is encouraged to cash in on all the debts he is owed, and to call in favors from everyone he has ever aided in the past. For this run is the culmination of his political career, the very moment he has been working towards for decades, and the reason he had defended politically connected candidates in court, offered free insight on an upcoming speech, or entered into political alliances with the hope of future payoff. Cicero had been preparing for this campaign his entire life, spending every waking moment weighing the political benefits of each action and decision so as to better position himself for electoral success and the resulting immortality that would be his as consul. It's a revealing portrait of just how important politics was to the Roman elite, and how the competition for offices and honors pervaded every aspect of society. But there is a dark undercurrent here as well. Cicero is reminded that this is his only chance at the office. There would be only one shot at something he and every other aristocrat coveted. Decades of preparation and vast sums of wealth were all wagered on one precise moment, a winner-take-all election that could mean wealth and prestige for the winner, and due to the loans required to run a campaign, possible destitution for the loser. We can understand then why, as the stakes associated with standing for office rose exponentially in the final decades of the Republic, more candidates would flout convention and transgress precedent to strengthen their electoral chances, through bribery or other underhanded tactics. Cicero would win election in a landslide, uniting the Roman aristocracy with his natural constituency of Italian municipal elites to trounce his rivals. His colleague in office would be Hybrida, meaning that the odd man out and the ultimate loser was Catiline, but due to factors described above, Catiline would not take his defeat lying down. He immediately planned another run and began to aggressively court the urban poor with a platform of debt cancellation, a promise he argued he would naturally follow through on as he had significant debts himself. When this campaign too ended in defeat, he was utterly ruined and began to plot the violent overthrow of the state. Catiline was from a storied patrician family, and had even been a firm supporter of Sulla. That such a man could be pushed toward radical populism, and then even to become a revolutionary, is indicative of the declining value of Republican traditions and precedent, even among the upper classes. Over the next decade, bribery would become even more pronounced, and violence would even spill over into the electoral process, until the working of the Republican order became untenable. The elections for 53 were delayed by months due to infighting, and then Rome was plunged into near anarchy, after the populist agitator Clodius was slain by the Optimate-aligned brown-shirt thug Milo. As the Senate House burned, Pompey would be named sole consul by the Senate, a dictatorship in all but name, that even had the backing of the staunch traditionalist Cato. Catiline's feared revolution had arrived a decade later, though now the strong man had a different name, and was responding to the will of a different political faction. From this point on, no Roman election can truly be called free and fair, and the Republic was on life support before it was snuffed out by Caesar's heir Octavian, when he was declared Augustus in 27 and took the mantle of princeps, or first citizen, but whom we recognize today as emperor. Augustus's ascent to political power had been eased by the brutal eradication of all political enemies shortly after the formation of his alliance with Mark Antony and Lepidus in the Second Triumvirate. Cicero and his brother were among the thousands slain by headhunters with Augustus's explicit blessing. On the run from these death squads in 43, Quintus heard that his son had been captured and was refusing to give up his father's location, even under torture. Upon learning this, Quintus turned himself in, hoping to save his son from this grisly fate. Instead, the murderers acting under orders from Augustus slew them both. It is a harrowing end, and a reminder that Augustus's false peace was purchased through the blood, not just of foreigners, but of many Romans. For the Machiavellian politics of the Republic that Quintus had been so well versed in, the elections that had form but no function had reached their logical conclusion. Augustus recognized that they were vestigial limbs to his evolving empire, and that men like Quintus and Cicero, men who believed so fervently in the old ways of the Republic, had no place in the world he was building. We should recognize that despite their faults, they deserve a place in ours.